So it's now, we're living in the post Yomim Neroim Tkufa, after Yom Neroim era, and we look back, and we all were certainly uplifted. We davened, we cried, we came close to Hashem, we became an elevated version of ourselves. But as soon as the tefillas fade, the intensity of Ne'ilah is not there anymore, and life settles back into regular routine, the daily grind, there's one burning question. That question is, how do we hold on to all that we've achieved? How do we preserve who we became during those days, or at least who we are, or who we were for those moments, and not let it all wash away in the floodwaters of daily life? As we know, the destructive waters of the Mabul, the Mei HaMabul, destroyed everything that had existed from Sheshis and Bereshis. As the Pasuk says, Kol asher nishmas ruach chaim ba'apoy b'charav mesu. Everything that had breath of life was destroyed from land. Everything perished. Aside, as Rashi quotes the Gemara in Sanhedrin, from fish. Very interestingly, they did not perish. They endured. The animals on dry land, they were wiped out. Mankind wiped out. Besides Noach and the Teva and those animals, everything else was destroyed except for, very interestingly, the fish that survived. The reason, the Mizrahi explains, is simple. Because all that needed to be punished were those that had been corrupted. And all the corruption took place on earth, as the Pasuk says, for all flesh had corrupted its way on earth, as we know. But fish, says the Mizrahi, who lived in the sea and were not part of the corruption, the Ashchasa, were therefore not included in the punishment. This is the well-known pshat of the Mizrahi. But really, if you think about it, you push one more time and you ask the next obvious question. So we know why they were spared. They didn't sin. But let's think. Does anyone tell us why they didn't sin? What were special? What were unique about the fish? Were they tzaddikim? Did they learn Musar? Were they privy to some Torah that the rest of the world, that the giraffes weren't privy to? Did they have long white beard? What was it about fish? What was so special? This is an important question that needs an answer. And for this, we look to the Heilige Maharal in Gur Aryeh, who answers beautifully. Based on the Pasuk in Bereshis, we know the Pasuk says in Parak Vav, Vayinochim Hashem ki asa es ha'adam ba'aretz. There was this sense of nechama, of consolement that Hashem felt that He created man on earth and not anywhere else. And Rashi explains, like, what's going on? What's this nechama about? That He created on earth? Where else would He have created man? And Rashi explains, Vayinochim Hashem ki asa nechama. What happened? Rashi says over there that the reason, the consolation before Hashem, was that He created man below, in the Olam HaTachtonim. For had Hashem created man among the heavenly beings, the esoteric, the malachim, malachim sharis, then man would have caused the malachim to rebel as well. And the Maharal explains that Hashem therefore was consoled that He created man on earth, for had man been created in heaven, He would have caused even the heavens to rebel. And from here we learn a powerful yesod, that when a person sins, he doesn't only corrupt himself, he affects everything in his environment. And had man been placed in Shemayim, been created in Shemayim, his rebellion would have influenced even the malachim. We can't understand this, we can't fathom this. But yes, says the Maharal, based on this pasuk, we see from here, Vaistois, the power of man is absolutely extraordinary, unfathomable. And of course, Midut Tov Meruba, how much more so when we channel it for the good, we channel it for positivity, for mitzvahs, for Torah, all the more so is this power. But says the Maharal that this is why the fish did not sin. Based on what we've said, that man has so much power. He can have ashpa, he can have influence even on the malach hasharis. And Hashem was consoled by the fact that He didn't create man on Shemayim, rather on earth. Says the Maharal, the reason why the fish were spared and they survived was because they lived apart, separated from man, in their own world and environment. And because of that, they remained untouched by man's corruption. Their survival came from their pirud, their shelter, their distance. And by staying beneath the surface, off the grid, they avoided the storm above. And while the world drowned in chaos, they swam peacefully in the calm depths, close to the Mayim Chaim, the Makor Chaim, that gives life. And the side for life is that at times the only way to stay pure is to stay separate, segregated, to make our own teva, to remain off the grid, not to be exposed. This world stands and screams for everything besides that. But when we are resilient and we fight the tide, build personal tevas around what is impure, around what doesn't belong, around what is not aligned with our hashkafas, that is how we will be saved. That's how we will endure, and that's how we will survive, both in Gashmias and in Ruchnias. To bring out this point, Rabbi Yankel Galinsky relates an incredible story. There was once a man who struggled terribly to overcome his alcohol addiction. And knowing he couldn't quit cold turkey, he decided, I'll make a Kabbalah. He said, I'm only going to drink when I have a partner, when I'm in company. And this way, he thought, I'll drink less. I won't always have someone to drink with. One day, the craving hit hard. He searched for a partner. One friend was busy, another one was already drunk, and he had to keep this Kabbalah. But the urge grew stronger, burned. The temptation was nagging at him. And so to save time, to make achanas for the moment that he will get his partner, he set out and prepared 2 empty cups, one for himself and one for his future partner. Hours passed, still no one came, and the cup sat there, staring at him, mouth salivating, he couldn't handle. His cheshik for alcohol was burning. And finally he said, I can't take it anymore. He didn't succumb to the test, but he did pour the wine, taking the last step of the hachanas for his indulgence, for his burning desire for some whiskey. And he said, I'll pour the cup, so at least the second someone comes, we'll be ready to go. Muchan and Muzuman, we're going to jump right in and drink it all up. Time passed, still no one showed up. And then finally, this shikar, he noticed a fly sipping from one of the cups. And the shikar said, he said, I have a partner. And he drank both cups until he was stoned once again. Says Rabbi Yankel Galinsky, what a fool, what a tippish. How sad and unfortunate. He had good intentions and he thought he was being clever. But instead of avoiding the test, he placed it right in front of himself. The danger wasn't in the sip he eventually took. It began in the moment he set the table. By pouring the wine, arranging the cups, and imagining a partner to drink with, he brought the test to himself. He made it a reality. He made the temptation convenient, immediate, and ultimately irresistible. And what could have been avoided became inevitable. Had the wine stayed in the bottle, the cups remained in the closet, the test would have stayed out of reach. He never would have fallen. His downfall didn't start with the drink. It began with the moment he set the table, allowing the test to sit right in front of his eyes. Meant that the battle was already half lost. Wisdom, not strength, would have saved him. And the lesson is clear and practical. Don't live next door to your tests. Don't live next to your nisyonis. The closer you are to the line, the easier it is to cross. And if you want to stay strong, stay far. Build a teva of isolation. And don't try to prove how strong you are. Prove how wise you are, because Hashem doesn't measure your greatness by how many battles you fight, but how many you avoid. We know the Vilna Gaon once said, I don't need to learn in a place where I'll be tempted to look out the window. I'll learn where there is no window. And if the Gaon lived like that, certainly we can too. We're not told to be hermits. We're told to be smart. Don't try to beat the system because the statistics are against you. True strength isn't standing in the storm. It's building walls before the storm comes. When you learn or daven, leave the phone somewhere else. When you're with your children, be with them. Not have present, not checking messages every few minutes. If a certain street or store or website pulls you down, don't go there. Don't click just to see. Don't be macho, don't be wise. Because the strongest person isn't the one who stares down temptation. It's the one who stays far from it. And that's why the fish survived the Mabul, because they didn't rely on strength. They relied on distance. They lived apart, untouched by the corruption, by the shchasa that drowned the world above. What we see is that holiness, kedusha, doesn't come from fighting every battle. It comes from choosing not to enter the battlefield. Keep the cups in your cupboard, in the closet, and you'll stay above the flood. The Yisod is clear. Stay far from the Nisayon, and the closer we go, the weaker we become. And like the fish of the Mabul who stayed in their own world and remain pure, separation is often the greatest protection. And sometimes the only way to stay pure is to stay apart. And as we move on from the Yom Niraim and want to stay close to the best version of ourselves, to hold on to what we've gained, we must guard where we live, spiritually and emotionally. And the fish survived the Mabul because they stayed in their own waters, untouched by the corruption of the world above. So too, if we want to preserve our purity, our levels of Kedusha, V'taira, and Dveikus, we must stay in our waters and make our tevis in environments of Torah, Tefillah, and good influence. And once we start setting out on the cups, it's much harder to resist the drink. If we keep our distance from the flood around us and remain within the Mayim Chaim of Kedusha, we too can stay alive and pure even as the world rages in chaos and destruction outside.